welcome to the first episode of Pharmacy Forward, Insights from Insiders, a new podcast from Gateway Health Partners. I'm Lesley Pink, your host. Today, I'll be talking with three people from Gateway: Azim Bari, Chief Clinical Officer, Rachel Schlukebier, Chief Pricing Officer, and Scott Webb, Senior Vice President of Sales. Welcome, Azim, Rachel, and Scott. We'll be talking all about 2026 and what the market could look like this year. There's a lot to get to, so let's get started. On the legislation side, there has been so much going on. The Inflation Reduction Act, known as the IRA, is one example. That has been reshaping the prescription drug landscape. With this legislation, 10 drugs as of January 1st are now subject to Medicare price negotiation. Can you tell us more about the IRA and how it's affecting pricing in general?
Sure, I'll take that. IRA was the Inflation Reduction Act signed into law in August of 2022. It was a wide range of legislation covering a variety of different items, from lowering consumer costs to reducing the federal deficit. So we're going to focus solely on the portion of the IRA that was intended to reduce the consumer cost through the Medicare price negotiation. What that really meant was CMS had the ability to do their own price negotiation, selecting high-cost single-source drugs covered under Part B and Part D. They focused on generic and biosimilar drugs with 7-year small moleculars and 10-year biologic rules. Their first pass were 10 drugs for 2026, and then another set of 20 for 27. How it's affecting pricing for January 2026 is really, for Medicare, you're going to see their price cuts. So there's a wide range of cuts, the smallest being around 38% for Imbruvica and all the way up to 76% or 80% for Januvia. So you're seeing high savings for the Medicare clients at the time of bill, which is really great for the members. But there's been some unintended consequences because of it. So what you're starting to see in the marketplace as a whole is an overarching implication, very similar to what we saw with AMCAP, which was really around Medicaid. Pharma has responded to IRA with a price reduction as a whole. So in certain situations, it was better for the manufacturer to take an overall price decrease in order to maintain either market share or really just ensure overall pricing strategy for their particular product. So 50% of the IRA products took an overall price reduction overall. So what that means is, although it was a Medicare legislation, it actually impacted commercial products. So you're seeing commercial savings for certain products such as Imbruvica and Farxiga, which members were not expecting. What that also means is you will, as a plan, potentially see a subsequent reduction in rebates. While that may feel like maybe not a great thing for the plan, it is a good thing overall because you're seeing upfront savings versus waiting to get rebates on the back end.
IRA is driving drug prices down and shrinking rebates across the market. So that's exactly why Gateway steps in certain situations with the proactive modeling and smarter contracting to protect your economics while, some of these competitors are getting caught flat-footed. So I just wanted to quickly say that, and I'll kick it over to you, Azim.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that's really important to understand is, we're going to have to work with clients directly to make sure they understand, the model is changing. Exactly to Rachel and Scott's point, the rebates are going away, but we're having a list price reduction on the front end and helping them understand what that means numerically, but then also working with them to see how that fits within their business model, because every client is different. So I think we are getting in front of clients to have those conversations, and prospects to have those conversations, to make sure that we can help them navigate this change and hopefully make those course adjustments as unintended consequences unravel from IRA. Because as we've seen and Rachel alluded to, the intent was really noble, but there's going to be a ton of downstream impacts and consequences just because everyone's going to make changes to align with their best interest as it relates to the value chain. So pharma, pharmacies, everyone that's involved. The other thing I just want to mention from a clinical perspective is just because a drug is, on the IRA list, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a commentary on the clinical benefits of that drug. It's also not a commentary on, if the drug is better or worse relative to its peers. So one thing that we're trying to communicate to clients is to evaluate formularies, what drugs they place on formulas. First and foremost, don't change what you're doing based on this legislation, but first and foremost, based on clinical merits of drugs. So look at the entire class, review it, make sure it is on par or superior to other drugs that are not on formulary, but don't let changes in IRA or pricing really dictate how you are going to be developing your formularies, because formularies by definition really should be clinical first. And then if all things are equal or similar, then you go ahead and look at the financial impacts of that. So we're having to navigate and have some of those conversations with clients as well to ensure that this really shouldn't impact that first part of that conversation when they're looking to do formularies and clinical programs.
Okay, I didn't think so much about the clinical side since this is really a conversation about the cost, but that's a really good point. And Rachel had mentioned AMCAP, which stands for Average Manufacturer Price Cap, and that removes the limits on rebates that drug manufacturers were once required to pay to make sure Medicaid received the lowest available price. How is AMCAP affecting pricing?
I think you're seeing really the same response from drug manufacturers. So they really only have two options in order to respond to that AMCAP effect. They either can take a price decrease so that they're not paying above what the drug is worth, or they can come out with an authorized generic in order to stay price neutral. So really what you're seeing is a price reduction, usually equitable to what that sort of, I'll call it excess above the drug pricing would be. You're starting to see a slowdown. That AMCAP impact really was heavy in 2024, a little bit in 25. I haven't seen as much of it so far in 26 comparative into the first year. Obviously, 1/1 of 24 was its biggest year and its first year that it happened. You'll see that continue to roll through, but it probably won't be as large as it has been in past years.
And how are PBMs addressing this? How does it affect contracts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's complicated. It's definitely shifting sort of how we have historically addressed formulary management, rebates. The landscape is changing a little bit. And so as we sort of monitor what's happening with AMCAP, what drugs are on the IRA list, to Azim's point, clinical first and foremost. And then we're going to continue to manage to our plan's desires and lowest net cost and make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our members and our plan designs. So we continue to monitor and manage to the best of our ability. Where available, there are still rebates on the table for these IRA drugs, and we'll continue to contract as we can contract. There are opportunities out there to be had. I wouldn't say walk away from them, but certainly, where appropriate, maximize the upfront savings where available.
Scott, Azim, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would just add one last thing, and the response to these kind of legislative policies, which Rachel alluded to, has been in many cases to reduce the list price. Many manufacturers, and rightfully so, have taken the opportunity to do what's best for them, right? Reduce the list price, but also under the backdrop of some of the scrutiny from the current administration, essentially take a victory lap and say, hey, we're lowering drug prices, we're doing what everyone wants us to do. But let's be honest, it's really something that they're doing because the economics dictate that, but also using it as an opportunity to get some goodwill from the public as well as the administration.
And I'll just add and reinforce what everyone's saying too. AMCAP's removal is driving manufacturers to slash list prices, which compresses rebates across the board. So at Gateway, we stay ahead of it by recalibrating pricing. We tighten our rebate credit protections, and we renegotiate contract terms to keep clients financially whole, while we see other PBMs kind of scrambling to explain the fallout and not staying ahead of it. So we try to stay ahead of things, bring value so our clients in the market doesn't blindside folks.
And As we're talking, excuse me, about all this pricing, we do need to bring up direct to consumer pricing and Trump RX and the impact that those could have. DTC is offering a new model for pricing. As of our recording date, Trump RX has not launched yet, but it's expected to early this year. Can you tell us more about direct to consumer, how about direct to Trump RX, how they operate, and why this matters?
Sure. Let me start the conversation on this one. So this is really and let's back up and talk about what direct to consumer has been and Trump RX has been. This is a response from not only the administration and their policies, but also from the market and consumers and employers and payers demanding more. Obviously, the big issue has been the cost of drugs escalating tremendously, really going up in cost year over year. A lot has been said about the current pricing schemes and mechanisms and how that's really unsustainable in the long run because of some of the policies of the administration and due to some of the frustrations that I just mentioned. The manufacturers came to the realization that, we can definitely offer some of these products directly to consumers through their manufacturer website, where either they're fulfilling the product through mail order or using a partner channel, maybe at a local pharmacy or a telepharmacy that works with them, and offering the product at a cash price, so no commercial insurance involved, and that's much lower in terms of net cost versus the product that would be going through their insurance. So let me clarify that. The net price, is potentially lower than what they potentially would be paying through insurance, because in many cases they're looking at drugs that their insurance may not cover. So a member may be on the hook for the full cost of the drug, or they have to go through significant administrative burdens such as prior authorizations and step therapies. And when they do that, it's a hassle. They might be responsible for the full cash price, which is going to be more than what the direct-to-consumer model offers. Because when you compare the full cash price, list price versus what the cash price of direct-to-consumer is, it's significantly less. So in those cases, the member wins. And the manufacturers haven't made this available for every single drug under the sun. It's really, the list will continue to evolve, but it's for, a host of drugs where there's enough demand where a patient will be like, you know what, if my doctor or if my insurance is not covering it, to heck with it, I'm going to go ahead and pay for this out of pocket. It's important enough to me. So it would be, of course, drugs such as weight loss drugs and GLPs have been the big one. That was the big driver, but also includes things such as migraines. If someone's suffering with a migraine and they can't get their medication, of course, they're going to pay out of pocket for this. So that's really what the direct to consumer has been. Trump RX is similar. It's a funny Venn diagram. There's overlap, but it's different. Trump RX is a website. It has not launched yet, as you mentioned, Lesley, and it's going to be a redirect. So you're going to go on there, and for manufacturers that have agreed to put their drugs on there and offer low pricing to members, or to patients that want to pay cash price, they can go in there, type in their drug, and it'll redirect them to manufacturer programs to, again, be able to access low-cost drugs via a cash price. Again, there will be significant overlap with the list of drugs for DTC versus Trump RX. Prices will be similar, although some will be the same, some will not. So it does get confusing very quick, but there are nuanced differences. The other part of Trump RX I just wanted to mention is it does have a component on the back end where they are doing pricing for both Medicaid and Medicare, where the administration was able to negotiate this term that we've all been hearing, most favored nations, or MFN, which is trying to bring down the price to the lowest price to peer nations that are out there relative to the U.S., so that we are not paying the highest price relative to our peer nations. So they are trying to lock in the lowest cash price. And here's the other wrinkle that gets a little bit confusing on Trump RX. So the consumer, if you're a cash pay person, not on Medicare, Medicaid, you try to get a drug, it may or may not be the same price as what Medicaid or Medicare has been able to lock in. Medicare and Medicaid through Trump RX in particular will get the lowest price. And most of the major manufacturers have signed up to participate, but each has different agreements. So many of them have several current drugs on there. Many of them have agreed to put future drugs on there. Each agreement with the administration is slightly different. But the key piece here is that Medicaid is, and Medicare are locking in those low prices. Obviously, for Medicaid, the member share, cost share is going to be $0. Medicare, in most instances, those drugs that are involved and covered through Medicare, the price cap on those products for the member will be $50, but the plan would be responsible for the balance. for those Medicare and Medicaid claims. Again, the total cost under those schemes are significantly less than what's available on the commercial market from a net cost perspective, and it's definitely more friendly in most cases for Medicare and Medicaid patients to go through Trump RX. But if they're doing cash price through Trump RX or even DTC, there could be instances where if they use their PBM or insurance card, their copay could be less going through the traditional route versus buying at cash price through Trump RX or DTC. The only wrinkle there is some patients, again, may not want to go through the hassle of going through prior authorization, step therapy, and all of that, and may opt to just pay the extra, differential and go through that DTC or Trump RX route.
Oh, thanks, Azim. You mentioned GLP-1s, and I wanted to talk about some specific drugs, including GLP-1s and biosimilars. In 2025, 18 biosimilars were approved in the US, and the total number of approved biosimilars is now around 80 or 81. On the GLP-1 side, we all know there's a lot going on. The first oral medicine for chronic weight management was approved at the end of December, and it looks like another approval could be coming through soon. We all know also that the use of GLP-1s has risen dramatically. In 2025, the market size was expected to be over $62 billion. Can you tell us how biosimilars and GLP-1s could affect the market?
Absolutely. So I think we're going to see the pace, and I'll tackle biosimilars first. We're going to see the pace of biosimilar adoption increase significantly over the next couple of years. And that's really due to the removal of certain roadblocks that were in place. So for a long time, we've had a pathway through IRA to get, to have biosimilars, which were essentially, and I'll use this term loosely, generics for biologic products. So now we've had several years with this pathway, but we really haven't had much adoption until recently. And what's changing is, and I think what's going to help accelerate things even further is the FDA is looking at some draft guidance, which will probably go into effect fairly soon. That's going to make allowing biosimilars to be interchangeable, meaning you can switch it at the pharmacy unless the patient or doctor explicitly forbid it. And there could be obviously some state law implications as well that have to be reviewed, but allowing a faster pathway to interchangeability. So if a doctor writes for a biologic reference product or the brand name biologic, unless the doctor or patients are saying no, and if state laws don't prohibit it, it can easily be changed to a biosimilar at the point of sale. They are looking at draft legislation to be allowed to do that, and that's been a sticking point in the past because previously it required those manufacturers to do significant amount of clinical testing. Some people thought it cost anywhere between $20 to $25 million to do this additional testing. Took an additional 1 to 3 years to get that interchangeability status. So having this, interchangeability, barrier removed, I think makes it a lot easier for patients to be able to access medications and makes it a lot less costly for manufacturers to produce these medications. So we're going to have more of them. It's going to naturally bring the cost down, and we're going to have payers really taking a second look at these products because the trend seems to indicate that it is where a lot of the lowest net cost products will be, but that's not the full story. As partners and then also PBMs in the industry have found out, just because something is lowest cost doesn't mean they'll be able to supply the market regularly. So you have to look at things such as, is it coming from a reputable manufacturer? Not just, is it the lowest cost? Because if you pick just the lowest cost, we've seen this happen. It's very possible that they're able to produce that product at that low price for about 6 months, and then maybe they go away, or maybe they sell their rights to a different manufacturer and they increase the prices. So you have to start forging relationships and doing due diligence to making sure you're selecting biosimilar manufacturers that you know are in it for the long run and are pricing their product appropriately, and you think will be able to keep that product in the marketplace without any supply chain issues. That's the big thing with biosimilars. On the GLP-1 front, I think it's going to be a very interesting time because they're literally testing GLPs for all indications under the sun. Now, I'm being a little bit facetious, but not too far from the truth. We're just looking at the horizon, and Gateway just recently put out a blog about the future of GLP-1s, which is definitely worth looking at. Talking about additional agents that will be released for weight loss and weight management. We had our first oral product, the Wegovy pill, that was approved late in 25. We'll have the Lilly product, the orforglipron, which is another oral GLP, which will be released hopefully Q2 of 26. And the orals will probably have somewhere between 25 and 33% of the market share at the end of the decade, because there's a whole bunch of people that don't like needles, and this is a great alternative for them. And it's also a great alternative for people that have used the injectable products to lose a ton of weight and want to take an oral pill to maintain that weight loss. But very quickly, additional indications we see on the horizon include peripheral artery disease, use in heart failure, substance use disorders, mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, as well as addiction, diabetic retinopathy, and increased utilization for products that don't already have one indication, getting the other indication. So what I mean by that is, we see that the Lilly product has indication for sleep apnea. We expect the Novo product to get that indication in the near future. And same thing with all-cause cardiovascular mortality. The Novo product has that indication. We expect the Lilly product to get that indication again in the near future. So they're chasing new indications, but they're also chasing indications that their competitors already have. So it's going to be a busy time in 26 and 27, and we're monitoring that situation really quickly, especially for not only these new indications that I mentioned, but also for hopefully competitors coming onto the market as well.
And I'll just add too, biosimilars are finally creating a real price pressure on high cost brands. While the GLP-1s are exploding into $60 million plus category, that's reshaping trend overnight. So from a gateway perspective, this year it's all about steering clients toward lower net cost biosimilar opportunities, tightening our rebate risk modeling on GLP-1s, and staying ahead of market shocks like new approvals, IRA ripple effects, and manufacturer list price, that can shift and hit budgets fast. So once again, I'm being redundant today, but we're trying to stay ahead of things, be proactive, not reactive to the market, and really support our clients with valuable insights and ways to pivot and shuffle out the noise and find a clear path forward.
Scott, you bring up a great point, because it seems like one can't almost be watching closely enough, because how many times do we call each other first thing in the morning to say, hey, did you see that? And Rachel, you as well, we're texting each other, say, hey, did you see this most recent legislative development or this manufactured development? So it is really about being vigilant, as Scott has mentioned, and formulating a plan, knowing your clients, knowing your prospects to help navigate through all this kind of turmoil and, unforeseen changes as things change, sometimes literally day by day, in terms of legislations, in terms of GLP indications, all of it. Very busy time in the marketplace.
Besides all of this, which there's obviously plenty, can you think of anything else that could possibly affect the market this year?
So I think there's a lot of headlines, and rightfully so, on the topics that you mentioned, Lesley. Biosimilars, GLPs, ever-changing pricing dynamics and legislative changes. Those are huge. And I always talk to clients about, there's the flash. What does a magician do? He's got you looking at one hand, and you got to see what's going on behind the scenes with the other hand, right? So I think a few of the other items that not as big but important and will be amplified in the upcoming years is what's going on the clinical side. I think oncology and cancer will continue to be significant classes. There's too many drugs to mention, but we're seeing the headlines. New therapies are making a dent. The 5-year survival, and Lesley, I think I'm taking this statistic from you, but the 5-year survival has jumped to 70% in
Yes.
oncology. But there's still concerns, right? We're still seeing an increase underneath that statistic of deaths related to colorectal cancer. So there's still work to be done, and there's a lot of that progress that we have made has been due to these amazing oncology medications that really awaken the immune system, allow the immune system to see the cancer, attack the cancer, and then there's a ton of new mechanisms of action that are coming down in cancer. So that's one. Cancer will continue to be a huge deal in terms of innovation, but unfortunately also in terms of cost. The other ones I wanted to mention, which may be niche, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's going to be a $5 billion drug. There is a drug that's going to be used to treat a very specific type of lung disease. Won't get into detail, called Brinsupri. It just came out last year. It has picked up a lot of steam. They just were talking last week at a huge conference at how the utilization has gone really through the roof, and even faster than they were anticipating in terms of pickup. This is another agent I think that will help, that will that it's going to be significant in terms of cost driver, but it's going to treat a population of patients that really didn't have any therapeutic alternatives before. And that is, I think, one of the positive unintended consequences of IRA. As Rachel alluded to earlier, there was a difference of, how long you have until, drug price negotiation based on whether you're a traditional or small molecule drug versus a large molecule or specialty or biotech drug. You have more time if you're one of these specialty biotech drugs before you have to go through price negotiations. So the R&D has really shifted towards these specialty biotech drugs because they have a longer runway before they have to acquiesce to the government and offer price concessions. And one of the benefits of that is now we're seeing pharmaceutical companies really tackle some of those niche disease states and orphan disease states that really didn't have great therapies for a long time. That's been, I would say, one of the positive impacts and fallouts of IRA.
I'll just add quickly too is the complexities are real and there's a lot of bad actors in the market today. So really partner with organizations that can show you the modeling, do the benchmarking, help you forecast, and those groups that really stand behind their numbers and help with predictability and make sure you're going into this confusion and these complexities the right way, fully loaded with the right data that gives you a real number, helps you hit your budgets and make sure you're doing things correctly. That's very fundamental, but you'll be surprised at what's going on today. It's real, it's complex, and you've got to work with organizations like Gateway that can help you navigate that.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. If you could use one word to sum up how you think 2026 is going to pan out, what would that word be? And I'll go to Rachel first.
I would say transitional.
Okay. Scott?
I don't know if this is one or two words, but buckle up.
How about seatbelt?
Yeah, there you go, seatbelt.
Azim?
I'll go a couple of words as well. Accelerated unpredictability. I think we've all been in this marketplace. We know things change day to day, but the pace of change has definitely accelerated. So I think it's gonna be a challenge for everyone in the ecosystem. But with folks like Rachel and Scott, we're helping to really get our arms around some of these issues and to be able to have these conversations with clients so that they know what to expect and what to do moving forward as things literally change day to day.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today and learned a lot about what this year could look like. Thank you, Azim, Rachel, and Scott, for joining us today for Gateway Health Partners' first podcast. And tune in for the next installment of Pharmacy Forward.
Thank you, Lesley.
Thank you.